Okay, welcome everyone to the fall 2023 RIEEE webinar series. This session today is about an exciting effort here in the Institute on knowledge co-production. So we are going to look at a specific opportunity coming up and talk about the effort overall within the Institute for a new focus on knowledge co-production. And our speaker today is Christine Hendren, the Interim Vice Provost for Research and Innovation at Appalachian State University. And she'll give us an overview of this effort and the specific opportunity coming up. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you, Grace. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. So thanks for that intro. And I'm happy to be here talking about this today. So as Grace mentioned, there's a specific opportunity causing us to talk about co-production of knowledge today. And it has to do with an NSF grant that we are a part of, Appalachian State. It is called InFrames. It's part of the Accelerating Research Through International Network-to-Network Collaborations program, or AccelNet. So the goals of this program, in case others are interested, because it's ongoing, are to really enable sort of the infrastructure socially and relationally for high-level coordination across multidisciplinary and importantly cross-cultural teams. So the program goals are to leverage prior NSF support at building research capacity and kind of take it to that next conglomeration level to launch international networks of networks. And the idea is that that would lead to accelerated advancement of an area of science after the award period of an individual of the AccelNet. So they hope that it is a multiplier for relationships and the different things that can come out of it. And the other goal is to recruit and foster diverse and internationally competent US-based workforce trained in conducting and leading multi-team international collaboration. So this can be in any area that's fundable by NSF, but with a special consideration for the grand challenges and the 10 big ideas within NSF. So InFrames is the tagline being convergent research for more sustainable materials. It is the international network for researching, advancing, and assessing materials for environmental sustainability. That's what that stands for. And it is around a $1.5 million award for over 3 years that is headquartered out of Duke University. And that covers mostly travel, but some other things too that we'll talk about to support network interactions. And it's headquartered at Duke, as I said, but App State is one of the hubs of the network. And I'm lucky enough to serve as co-PI. And there's, importantly for this audience, there are opportunities for App State faculty, staff, and students to engage with this. So we hope people take that. And so I'll talk a little bit about what InFrames at Appalachian State looks like. So back to this slide, one thing that I've added on here is the past events. These are examples of the engagement possibilities. So there was a meeting in Venice in May that was a great one. There have been others. Very recently, there was a smaller meeting for those wanting to work on synchrotron measurements in complex media at Brookhaven National Lab. And there was an InFrames kickoff meeting at the beginning, going further back in time, with several App State participants who connected in with the network. So that included myself, Grace Plummer, Tanya Coffey, who also brought a student with her from physics, Bob Swarthout, and Al Schwab. And so there are a handful of people. You can reach out to them if you want to ask how that went, but that was kind of the starting point for making these connections into the network, and more are possible. So the vision of the InFrames network, why we did this, is to build, as I mentioned in the program requirements, is that it's building on prior NSF investments to create the capacity to leverage and do more with that work in an international collaborative sense. So this was building on the US and EU environmental nanotechnology community and the networks into a coordinated meta network to take what we learned during the nano EHS, as it's called, years and apply it into different specific application areas. So the idea is to advance research discovery and leverage resources across participating networks and really take the things that we learned methods wise and help them advance different applied uses of this. So this, you're not supposed to take anything in from this except that, one, it took me hours to make because I didn't use a smart program, but two, that this is a huge and complex network that builds on, 20 and beyond 20 years of relationship building by a lot of our network leaders, and inviting in more people all the time. So you see SAINT right here. So the director of InFrames was the director of SAINT. And that stands for the Center for the Environmental Implications of Nanotechnology. That was a prior NSF center, lasted for 10, 11 years. And that's the kind of investment that we're then connecting to make an international networks of networks. Center for Sustainable Nanotechnology, also a long-standing NSF investment that is still ongoing. I think it might be in its last couple of years. And then there are several European, this is roughly geographical, several European projects that also are networks themselves. And so what we did was kind of explain that what are the things that these different nodes have in common? Complex systems, meaning like a mesocosm where you would test a lot of different nanomaterials in there. Image and light source, so where are the beam lines that people can use? Informatics, an important linkage. So anything with blue has informatics modeling these complex systems and or even the smaller scale systems and what are the forces that are governing them. And then convergence is this red line. So this is areas of the network of networks that really focus specifically on how to enable convergence. So this is kind of how we indicated what the starting point of our network of networks was. And this gives you a sense of who are the players and where are the players anyway, that are all invited to these types of events. So the way we designed this AccelNet is to employ principles of team science, to apply transdisciplinary methods and frameworks to the people and the methods of the nano EHS community in order to address complex questions. So what you see in that prior map of what the network of networks is are these different complex systems, imaging and visualizations, informatics and modeling, all going through kind of this convergence filter to be able to address some important applied areas. So how can we use what we learned in nano environment, health and safety research to shed light on and advance agricultural applications, knowledge about micro and nanoplastics in the environment, transportation and infrastructure in some senses, and bioparticles that several of our folks are working on as well. That could include, bioparticles at the nanoscale, such as viruses or extracellular vesicles or other things in the environment we might want to use nano techniques to characterize. And so this network that attempts to do all of this convergence by naming some of those capacities holds workshops, short courses, some webinars, what you can kind of see here, lab rotations for students in particular to go visit one another or between meetings, protocol development for when we're creating methods or applying the methods of a nano EHS in a new environment or a new application area, and then technology assessments with regard to this safer by design ideas in the European Union or just our risk assessment paradigms here in the US. So Grace opened up by explaining that this is a kind of a co-creation and co-production focus, which is an area that RIEEE and increasingly App State University are kind of advancing our expertise in. And the reason that we are doing that is because these are key aspects to practically converging and to solving complex problems. So they also share trait of being kind of popular words right now. And when a concept gets popular, it can be a little bit of a buzzword. So what does it mean really? The NSF defines co-production as the integration of different knowledge systems and methodologies to systematically understand the phenomena, systems, and processes being studied in a research project. So unsurprisingly, NSF describes it with respect to research, since they are the National Science Foundation, a little bit broadly by a social economist, Eleanor Ostrom, who coined the term. She talked about co-production as a process through which inputs from individuals who are not in the same organization are transformed into goods and services. So how do we translate our knowledge into impact in the world together? And co-creation, which is an adjacent and important term, has been defined as a shift in thinking from the organization as a definer of value to a more participative process where people and organizations together generate and develop meaning. So what it means is one person or organization isn't acting alone unilaterally. When we're trying to solve a complex problem, if we want it to stick and really be effective, then it has to have multiple voices in there. So this is another example of something you don't need to read completely, but here is the starting point before we add co-creation and co-production concepts into our international network of networks and in-frames. We brought everybody together. I mentioned that May kickoff meeting in 2022. And we asked everybody from across that whole network to submit some questions. What are the questions that everybody had in that researcher network about nano and microplastics? And so these are some of the examples, and there's a wide breadth of them, right? You don't have to read them all. Many of them were about how to detect and quantify micro and nanoplastics in complex matrices. That makes a lot of sense because this is a group of people who have created a host of assays and approaches for characterization and detection, right? So they're worried about that. At what concentrations do micro and nanoplastics become important? What is the best way to model the breakdown of them? What is the surface reactivity towards other pollutants and their ability to connect to those pollutants and transport them in the environment? And so what you see is there's a wide breadth of scientific questions, but it is only pretty much scientific questions, right? So if we're going to, that's a very important function of the network of networks, but if we're going to bring this to a solution set that actually addresses nano and microplastics, for example, in surface waters, it can't be only these questions, right? It needs to be questions like, where are we getting the plastic? Why is it getting into the environment? Those types of things. And those may be best posed by other people. So what we're talking about here is how do we bring those other people in, and how do we do that in a way that still uses everybody's time well, right? Here's a similar list for nanoscale materials in agriculture. So you see, again, really important question, but pretty homogeneous in terms of the vantage point from which it is posed. So can we employ Raman identification and characterization of these nutrients in complex media, right? How can we enable effective delivery of nutrients or pesticides by smart nano delivery systems? And so those are very important questions in understanding, but it, again, needs to be blended into questions from other vantage points. So this is that same theoretical kind of a convergence map mapped to what we are thinking of when we plan a meeting that we'll talk about in this webinar that will happen in May of 2024, in what we got a supplement to the in-frames network to do, which was set up an in-frames co-production test bed. So there's a lot of people working on co-production, community engaged research, lots of these different resources are out there, but we haven't done a convergent sort of pilot project around the in-frames topical areas. And so we decided, let's try it. What would it look like to make that real? And what would it look like to do that in the high country area? So we're talking about who are these other voices, right? In addition to that list of scientific questions, would they be topically relevant nonprofits and for-profit entities? Maybe, you know, like a river outfitter, somebody who is worried about microplastics in water, from a locally relevant decision maker standpoint, a river keeper perhaps, students at all levels, community members of all ages, artists and storytellers who help us make meaning of life and bring emotion and full human experience into understanding of complex issues. Global network of academic researchers, well, we've got that part in frames, and then perhaps K-12 educators and libraries. And of course, this is not intended to be an exhaustive list. I'm sure most of these people are in fact exhausted, but there are more types of them. And then what comes out of there, right? So you pull these people together, and if you structure that interaction in an objective, focused, and useful way, then hopefully you get shared priority setting and decision-making capabilities, broadly available educational and artistic products. Although, yeah, artistic products, now that I'm seeing that, that's quite an engineering point of view. I would like to hear how our artists think of that. Bi-directional education across boundaries, and then local, national, and international perspectives on these socio-environmental challenges. So again, going back to the NSF goals of the program are that there must be cultural diversity and interdependence. So kind of drawing on that as well as we look to create this event. So we want to do all this, then it kind of poses the question to ourselves, how do we intentionally create conditions that promote convergence to address a complex problem? And what we need in order to do that is to develop a shared understanding of the problem that the team is addressing, and a vision for what we're trying to achieve. And to also, so that's shared, but then the individuals coming to the table need to develop their own individualized understanding of how one fits in and contributes to addressing the problem. So as we go forward, organizing this event in May, together with lots of different thoughts from different vantage points, we'll be thinking of both of those aspects. And then how do we build a culture that fosters emergent ideas and co-creation? So what we have to do is build capacity across the team and the individuals, as was described on the prior slide, and then also to blend expertise. So these are a couple of interesting quotes for the folks that would want to reference to this type of work. And so it's to solve complex problems requires more than contributory expertise. It also requires interactional expertise. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. So I might have the exact right answer, but if I don't have an integrative way of sharing that with a group where they can take it in, then that answer does nothing to advance our shared problem solving goals. And then the second one is that interactive and contributory expertise are intertwined, which I think we kind of understand, right? So previous literature on scientific teams has found that great teams are not built on scientific expertise alone, but on the processes and interactions that build psychological safety, create a shared language, engage members emotionally, and promote effective interactions. So I pulled those quotes out because as we design an event together that is intended to have a scientific agenda informed by non-scientists as well, we need to be making sure that we are listening to this and creating a shared sense of the understanding in the language, and also really welcoming psychological safety. So there's a lot of kind of power dynamics or othering that can happen in fields where you think, oh, well, I'm not an expert, right? So how do we make sure that we create the true and effective welcoming of various ideas in a way that can advance our understanding of how to deal with these interesting issues? So one way that we do that is to use what are called convergence boundary objects, or just boundary objects. We have used in a center that I'll talk about in a little bit, we've added convergence because they are specifically deployed in order to help converge across boundary. But what is a boundary object? This idea was coined by Susan Lee Starr, and she is a social ecologist and many other different disciplines she could claim. But she use this name to talk about an artifact, whether it's abstract or concrete, that people coming from a range of knowledge bases can use to understand how they're engaging with a problem together. And it allows a broad range of people to contextualize how they contribute to a complex problem without having to achieve complete consensus or fully shared understanding of the various parts. And so an analogy that I like with this is if you've ever seen kids walking, you know, from preschool where they're maybe too little to be completely safe on their own. They can't get there without being tethered to each other. They just have to know where to hold on that rope. And that keeps them together so that they can go along and learn together. They don't have to fully understand the route. They don't have to know where everybody else is. They just need to know where they hold on. And then that helps with the journey. And so Lee Starr says that the creation and management of boundary objects is a key process in developing and maintaining coherence across intersecting social worlds. And that is the work of convergence and kind of managing co-production and creating the conditions for co-creation. So we use some interesting animation we use some boundary objects in doing what we want to do together. So one thing in creating these boundary objects, I'll take a moment to take us through the fact that we're doing this effort at Appalachian State in Boone. So we're inviting this international network of networks of people to come here for a meeting. And then we're also inviting people from the community that are relevant stakeholders to come and talk about the topic at hand so that we can put it all together. Well, one thing we need to know is understand the incentives of the people involved, of course. So what does it look like to do this type of work at a primarily undergraduate institution, a regional comprehensive master's, such as App State is right now? And we have learned a little bit through a few of these large, complex, multi-institutional projects about how to enable research success by leaning into the strengths of our institution and supporting faculty through challenge, multiple challenges. So excellent teacher scholars, as we have here, spend a lot of time teaching, and they do so in a system with fewer research support resources than an R1 would have, because that is just kind of the name of the game in institutions. So what we need to do is look at sort of the students and the workforce around us and the place that we're in, and put all of those things into a context to know how to best set up a research project. And that's kind of what we've done with what we're proposing to do for this effort. We need to work within the academic calendar year cycle for timing of the teaching load. We need to systematize the opportunities to engage, so there's not a complete startup for every individual faculty, staff, and student project member, but we show how they can plug in, and we can develop kind of integrated credit-bearing research experiences, which we have used in some other projects. We don't have plans to necessarily plug that into the in-frames meeting, but it's an important mechanism. And then we highlight some of the applied research and research impact communications, which will be very important for this, particularly because we're wanting to pull in other non-academic partners. And then, of course, central to this is really increasing our community engaged research. So these are all the ways that we can kind of make the most out of the specialness that App State has to offer and in the high country. And then, of course, what we're doing is connecting into larger research projects led by R1 universities, such as Duke, leading this. So one thing that we can use as a boundary object in this case is the idea of data as a boundary object. So regardless of who you are in the system, say you care about surface waters, then information about that surface water quality is going to be useful to you, right? And it might be that you are the generator of the data. It might be that you are the recipient of it. It may be that you are the asker of the question that caused the data to be generated. So we like to think about this cycle and with relation to what we might consider diving into for the in-frames event in this way is by remembering first and foremost, that we are doing all of this work, this scientific research, in order to answer research questions. And that seems obvious, but it's very easy to get tunnel vision in our methods and generating data, and just, this engagement with the applied nature does help us remember we're doing all this to answer questions. And to do that, we have to collect some data to do that. And then we need to be able to put the data together to make information and then translate that to knowledge, right? So we have to do that in a consistent format with a consistent language, hopefully to a repository. So this could be a spreadsheet, or it could be a set of presentations that we make together. But in some way, we've got to be able to get our arms and minds around the information that we've generated, these data. And then we have to be able to kind of ask questions of those data, compare them, get to those answers, and then those answers hopefully help us pose new research questions and shape the way we get more that we prioritize and sequence the data that we go after going forward. So that's one possible data or boundary object to pull this group together for the convergent goals we have. This is the same picture as before of the idea of our in-frames co-production test bed. One thing you might be wondering, which I would be wondering, I've mentioned a couple times surface waters, but as an example, but in order to have some kind of boundary object topic to orient ourselves around, it can't just be, how about microplastics? We do need to have a shared topic of focus. And so we are indeed going to make the focus of our in-frames event in May to look at the system of surface waters as they relate to a couple of different topic areas within the in-frames world, which I will talk about in coming slides. Actually, immediately in this coming slide. So it's going to be the case that we focus on microplastics and nanoplastics in surface waters, and also nutrient cycling in surface waters. I kind of foreshadowed that as well by talking about what our initial questions were at that kickoff and showing you all of the academic research-based questions on that. So how do we change that to, bring in this co-production approach, and how do we kind of practically engage other people? What would make them want to be part of this? And so one of the things we wanted to do is think about a way to, and you know what, this is old, so ignore the second one, sorry guys. But we want to think about a way to use the time. So what's going to happen in a practical sense is people will come from all over, like I said, to Boone. And we don't know how many yet, probably, 15, I'm thinking 18, maybe, more if they want. And then we'll have a much larger group of people that is from the community, so that we have a mixture of academic researchers, international and national partners, App State researchers, and then we also have the community partners that we want to engage. And so what we think is that, we'll have a pretty standard set of sessions that you would normally see at a meeting, except for that they will be altered a little bit, with credit to Eric Marland for his design of his freshwater conference in the spring, I think, of 2023. Which melds together a few different vantage points around topics of shared interest. So these topics of shared interest serve as another kind of glue or boundary object. So what we thought is we'd have 3 panels, each of which taking maybe 2 hours total. So that will fill almost a day, right? With coffee breaks and with lunch and giving ourselves some time. And the panels would be one on the substance of interest, so this topic that I mentioned, which would be the micro and nanoplastics or the nutrients. And that might include 10 to 15-minute talks from 3 different people. These are to be determined, so this isn't kind of a priori, but the idea of the model is that it would be an in-frames researcher, a community partner, perhaps students, either K-12 from the community. One of our Swiss partners suggested, why not have an elementary school student? They have a point of view on plastic in their water, right? So we really can think very broadly about this. And then similarly, then so they would all give us a talk, and then we would have an open discussion with everyone in the meeting. Which, depending on the size of the meeting, which also will be designed kind of by a community effort, then that would shape what that interactive discussion looks like. But the idea is that everybody feels, part of it and part of learning from it. And then the second topic would be the system of interest, which in this case is water. Being at the headwaters of 5 different river basins and in a gorgeous place, there's lots of connection to this from many vantage points. So again, kind of a diverse panel doing the same model with some talks to give us some food for thought from various vantage points, then some discussions. And then the third one would be about the hazards. So why is it bad? Is it bad to have an overabundance of nutrients in the waters, or what is the impact of having nanoplastics and microplastics in the water? So we're thinking about these. And then what this kind of vestigial text down here was going to be is that only is one day of the meeting. So the other piece of imagining this is thinking about what could be some interactive activities. Like, here's just a thrown out example. There is a project called the 100 Rivers Project. And it's a very open citizen science opportunity. So we could think about whether perhaps if we have somebody on our team from public education and they want to consider some type of citizen science with kids that happens during the spring leading up to May, then those kids could actually be presenters at the May meeting. So not volunteering anybody to do anything, but those are the types of things that could be open. Might be that there's a nonprofit that wants to do some activity that is inclusive of some work that would lead up to having a voice at this meeting, so that it kind of flips it from what I have seen at some more cross-sectoral scientific meetings, is that we very openly invite people to come to a party that we threw and designed for ourselves, right? So how does it look to flip it and see what else could come to kind of complement these panels? And that would also include, as we'll see in a future slide, something that happens afterward that we're just calling more a community event, because that part, as the seeding body of it, we really want to stay agnostic to what that looks like, so that it truly can be kind of co-designed. So this is just a little timeline explaining how this would work. So asking ourselves, how would we meaningfully engage other interested parties in driving research agendas? So as we know, the InFrames network of networks is putting together a larger research agenda to ask the types of questions that you saw on those detailed first slides. But coming out of a meeting like this, it would be great if we understood what was the most driving priority of other folks that are not academics. And you can't research that entire list of 45 questions you saw. So which ones do you pick? So that's kind of what we want to interrogate with this. So the topic is, again, interactions between surface waters and human decisions, targeting microplastics and nutriocycling. And then we have chosen a place intentionally to also further narrow the boundary objects. So remote rural mountain headwaters region with a PUI university and heavy ecotourism. So that's specific. That kind of helps us hone in on shared questions as well. So right now is when we are recruiting faculty partners and community partners. And I'll say a tiny bit more about that. Then as soon as we have people on board for a team, then we'll engage in monthly co-production meetings, December through May. And in those meetings, then we'll kind of design those activities and fill in those blanks that I showed you on the prior slide. And then the InFrames meeting, which is going to be, co-produced by and for this range of parties, will be May 16th and 17th, 2024. And then the co-produced event, similarly co-produced by these same parties and whoever else they invite, will be on that Saturday, partially so that, school children could come and the people from the community with jobs could be welcome if they have, weekends off. And so meetings and some aspects of this event will be funded by in-frames, but largely it will be enabled by this kind of supplement fund that we got, which we'll talk about how we'll use that a little bit. And then hopefully we will harness that resulting both the co-production insights and the social infrastructure that is formed by kind of this novel interaction. Hopefully we use this to not only inform the decisions about what we research as a network of networks, but as a proof of concept that it is possible to bring together engaged parties in a meaningful way. And I'm sure we'll also have some lessons learned about how we would do it if we had a second go. Okay, so faculty partners, how we'll recruit those folks is we are offering, it's not an exact number because we don't know the exact number of people yet. That's why it's a range. But we want to provide several $1,000s for the time that people are engaging. And so that would be for assisting with planning and executing the program in some way during those days. Building community partner relationships, which hopefully again are kind of ongoing social infrastructure for later, and then producing something. So the reason we have these three limited is because we envisioned that we might specifically target 3 buckets of engagement to make a nice range. So we would like to produce the social infrastructure. If somebody wants to propose that their engagement with this planning process would be to orchestrate and coordinate a lot of the people on campus and off who have to do with these topics as a linking area of interest for research, that would be one. That could look like a lot of different things. That's why what I just said was so vague. We might produce some art. We'd love to invite somebody from the arts to make a proposal for how they might engage. So you've seen a lot, I'm sure, of different art projects that are made from reclaimed plastic from rivers, that type of a thing, or it may be anything else that is related to this. But on the event on the May 18th in particular, we thought it would be really nice to show that there are multiple ways to engage with this topic. And that it's not only the scientific data, but also, the full kind of range of human emotions and perspectives that art can show in a way that other fields can't. And then K-12 engagement, we're hoping that somebody would make a proposal to have some outreach activities associated with this event and potentially engage with some partners that are part of the community partner group to have even some pre-activities that could, like I was mentioning earlier, lead up to a meaningful engagement as one of the presentations or, speaking roles in the meeting itself. And then community partners, similarly, we are also looking at paying them, again, as a range based on how many people we end up getting. So they would also be attending these monthly co-production meetings and co-designing the program. And maybe serving as speakers themselves or recommending speakers, recruiting and advertising to get folks from their part of the world to engage with the event itself, and also, proposing activities to contribute in the lead up to and the meat of the event. This is just an aside to say, okay, this was all the in-frames project, but I mentioned I would touch on another center. One of the other big projects that RIEEE is an anchor for is the Science and Technologies for Phosphorus Sustainability Project. It's an NSF Science and Technology Center headquartered out of NC State, but for which App State is an important hub. So we, in that project, do a lot of different things. One of them, taken in total, all of the App State activities mostly center around this multi-year arc of sub-projects that are focused on mapping regional phosphorus cycling through this multi-stakeholder transdisciplinary network of projects. So basically we want to know, how do we know what the phosphorus is doing here in the high country? How would we know if we were making it better or worse? How do we know what the levers are, right? So this is a lot to take in. I will acknowledge that. But this is because we are doing a lot. So each of these boxes in this diagram, this was our poster for the NSF site visit that came to see what steps had done over the year. And this was kind of our conglomerate representation of what App State had done. So each of these boxes is its own funded subtask associated with a faculty member, each of which is in a different department, and also at least one student, sometimes more in many cases. And so it's everything from measuring the phosphorus in different samples to going to take samples from surface waters and wastewater treatment plants, improving phosphorus nutrient cycling in small holding like animal agriculture, cows and chickens, and then quantifying the phosphorus exports from the evergreen tree industry. And then kind of encompassing all of that is a project led out of our Government and Justice Studies department by Jay Rickabaugh that is charting the public sector influence. So there's all these flows of phosphorus going, well, who's deciding things that cause there to be influence on those flows? So for each of these, we have to ask, what are the flows that matter? Who is affected by it? Who influences it? And what are the connection possibilities? So this is sort of steps in a nutshell. And there's lots of ways to get involved with that as well. So reach out to Grace Plummer if you are interested in learning about that. But the reason that I bring it up in this presentation is because we have an opportunity, since the In-Frames event focuses on micro and nanoplastics and nutrient cycling, to pull in some of the work and the interest in the STEPS project together with the In-Frames group. And what we're looking to do ultimately with that is really highlight this confluence of interest and expertise that's growing at App State in convergence and co-production together, because we can use this for lots of complex environmental and social problems. As we think of our region and our university as a lab, we have the benefit of this gorgeous place that is very tight-knit with long-standing relationships, a lot of commitment to place and to institution. And that's a resource in itself. That's a really strong social infrastructure that we can draw upon to kind of help us be convergence wave makers. So this is just saying this In-Frames event in May is meant to pull all of these groups together and can be a really powerful jumping off point, but also a powerful invitation to have things that you might be interested, either folks that are here who are watching this back and maybe considering applying for one of these roles as either a community partner in planning this event or a faculty partner planning this event. Just want to make sure that you realize that your ideas can also shape this quite significantly to make it an impactful event. Oh, and this is potentially part of why we get to hold it in Boone, is because the AccelNet membership is so taken with our gorgeous place that I just, had a little soapbox moment about our commitment to. So I'm really excited that they're going to get to come see it. And you should know they are all very excited too. So I'm hoping that we pull a lot of nice international collaboration research this way. And another note on that front is that please feel free to reach out with creative ideas of how we can leverage that visit. So it may be that one of the surrounding days of the visit, we could create some kind of an intake form for people to say, oh, these are the folks who are coming that are interested in meeting with potential collaborators. How can we do some matchmaking there so that students and faculty can take advantage of the talent that's coming this way? And I think that might be it.
Thank you, Christine. That was quite a lot of information. I want to, before we open for questions, I wanted to just add a couple of details to what Christine mentioned. So she talked about the imminent solicitation or RFP to participate in the planning committee for the co-production test bed for the spring event. We will also, I just wanted to take the opportunity to make a plug here in the coming month or so. We will be engaging a new set of subtasks funded by the STEPS at App State effort as well. So if nutrient cycling, phosphorus cycling, and that the piece on STEPS that Christine mentioned is of interest to you, please reach out to me because we will have a new round of tasks starting soon. And we do have, I don't know, 10, 12 minutes if anybody had any questions. Okay. Oh, thanks, Kim. So I'm, okay, that's a clap, not a hand raise. Just double checking.
I'm curious if Natan, I don't know, you might be triple tasking and doing stuff in the lab, so I didn't want to put you on the spot, but did you hear anything that was different than what you thought, being the Duke in-frames guru?
No, it's all good. Well, it's good and we will align. And it will be great to have like in-frame in the center. So yeah, nothing. Yeah. I learned a lot of stuff.
Okay, then I'll just thank everyone for attending today and stop our recording. And then if there's any discussion after that, we can stay on for it. Thank you, Christine. And thanks everyone for being here.
Thanks.